Okay, I'm having like an out-of-body experience. Okay.
Awesome.
Well, it's Memorial Day with Ming. Thanks for being here. This is my first, I think, official podcast after practicing for the last year in my own special way. So it's very exciting for me. But this is probably my last podcast for the school year. So I'm very excited about that. And you're going to be speaking to my students today.
Wow. All right. Save the best for last, huh?
There you go.
So yeah, if you look around, you know, immediately you're like, okay, these guys are collectors, they're nerds, they love pop culture, and I mean, seriously, we try to represent a fandom for everybody. So I want people to come and say, oh, you have Harry Potter in here, you have Marvel, you have DC, you have Batman, you have Captain America. I think it puts people immediately at ease, for sure.
For sure. And I get the feeling that you've been to a few ComicCons.
You could say that. Yeah, you could say that. I mean, you could say that even about this year. I've already been to a few ComicCons, but people have asked me like, how many ComicCons have you been to? I'm like, lifetime? Like,
right.
Yeah. I'm like, I can't even. I've lost count. I gotta be closing in on 200 at this point.
And I've never been.
You would love it.
What exactly is ComicCon?
So ComicCon, I mean, it started out as people just buying and trading comic books and toys, and at the heart of it, it was people trying, comic books come in their sequential order, issue 1, issue 20.
Right.
So to complete a run, you would have gaps sometimes, like, oh, I'm missing issue 15 of Superman, or I need this one, so you would go and try to find that issue, and then there were retailers who would stockpile back issues and current issues that you could go and buy and sell and trade. And in the old days, I think it was really just about completing collections. But later on, as comic books became more mainstream, they shot up in value,
right.
Especially as the general population became more aware of these characters, especially since when they hit the movies and everyone's aware of them, it's like, oh man, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I need the first appearance of Spider-Man, and which at one time you could get for a couple dollars. Now for a really nice mint condition copy, you're over $1 million. It could be over $1 million. So, but now, with the explosion of pop culture, now it's kind of broken down into three things. The comic book vendors, and vendors in general. So comic books, toys, vintage toys, and then the other component is artists. So there are no comic books without creators. So usually there's a place called Artist Alley, where you can meet all the artists that create the comic books and characters. A lot of the writers as well, because without the writers, there's also no comic book. So,
right.
And then the third component, they to draw crowds in, they usually book media guests. So this could range anyone from maybe your favorite TV show, like somebody from Happy Days would come out. The guy who played like Ralph Malph could come out and you get his autograph and take a photo with him. Anywhere on up to like Arnold Schwarzenegger has done Comic-Cons. Like Michael Keaton has done Comic-Cons. Ben Affleck has done Comic-Cons. So that's, and for a lot of people, most people, I think it's the one and only chance you'll get to meet them in person,
right.
in a controlled environment, and get an autograph and talk to them for a little bit. Yeah,
that's
so
awesome.
you got those three components, and usually a 3-day event, usually Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It'll come to major cities, or not so major, and now there's smaller ones. It's pretty cool, and to me, it's the greatest party of the weekend. And so whereas in the past I got to go to Comic-Cons as a fan, now because I was on a TV show based on comic books, I get invited out as one of those guests.
So I didn't realize that. What TV show were you on?
I was on a TV show called Comic Book Men. Shot in Red Bank, New Jersey, and it shot inside of filmmaker Kevin Smith's comic book shop that he owned. But, people are like, well, what? I've never seen it. What's it about? And the easiest way to describe it is we took that show Pawn Stars that everybody knows and loves.
Right.
We ripped it off, and instead of a pawn shop, we put it inside of a comic shop.
Got it.
And instead of, like gold bars or motorcycles or whatever they deal with on that show, we concentrated mainly on vintage toys and comics. So it was pretty cool. So we gave people a history lesson on, say Spider-Man or Batman and whatever. Or a lot of the times people would bring in an old toy from the 80s, and people watching was like, oh man, I had that toy. my mom threw it out, and then you would see that we would sell it for like $2,000. Like, oh man, my mom, they get mad at their mom for throwing out their old toys.
So do you feel like young people today there's that same appeal?
Oh, I mean, I think it's even bigger now. Now, nerddom and comics and all these things are in the mainstream now. So, whereas when I was a kid, I got made fun of for reading comic books. People were like, "Why are you reading comic books? Those are for kids. Those will get you nowhere." Why don't you? Yeah, my mom was always hounding me. It's like, why don't you read a real book? Like, all the books you read have pictures in them. That's not real reading. I'm like,
and it is.
Yeah, I'm like, why would I not read this? There's a guy with a flaming skull and a motorcycle in my book. This is,
And it drew you in.
Oh, it totally did. Yeah. But
and now they call them graphic novels.
Graphic novels, trade paperbacks. Yeah. That's the classier description. Yeah, for sure.
So, how did you get into podcasting?
I got into podcasting because of Kevin Smith. He started a lot earlier than a lot of people did. He started way back in 2007, and Kevin Smith has always been one step ahead of everybody else.
Right.
He started podcasting because he was looking for a format where there were no rules. So he's a man who does not really answer to anybody, and that's what makes him so great. He's a man who wants to speak his mind and say whatever he wants to say and have nobody tell him, like, oh, you can't say that, or
right.
So and he loves to talk. He loves to talk. For a guy who plays a character named Silent Bob, he's anything but silent.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he's a great story. He's one of the greatest storytellers that I've ever met personally. But the problem was there was no medium where he could say whatever he wanted. So he gave radio a shot for one night, and
that's what I wanted to ask you.
He couldn't curse. He had a break every 15 minutes for a commercial. Yeah, it just wasn't what he thought it would be. And then a little bit later, he was like, "Oh, podcasting, what's this?" It's like, well, it's like radio. It's on the internet. Right. It's worldwide, and you can do whatever you want. You control your own destiny. You produce your own show. More importantly, you can say whatever you want. And he's like, "Really? I can swear?" I'm like, "Well, yes, sir. You're from New Jersey. You're gonna swear. That's just how we talk here." And his from episode 1 of his show, it took off. Yeah, his first episode got like 1 million downloads, and because he had a fan base already.
Sure.
But he also told very interesting stories about being on set, making films, just being him, and everyone loves Kevin. So and he tells stories in a way that's very, very engaging and interesting. So immediately his podcast took off. I was the guy who would take his podcast and put it up on iTunes. I was a guy who was very comfortable sitting behind a computer in a dark room for 24 hours a day,
right,
and helping him out that way. That was my my love is technology. I love I love ones and zeros. I love anything digital. So that's the only part that appealed to me. I had no desire to be behind a microphone or a camera or anywhere in the forefront. I was happy being in the background and doing tech support from the background. But eventually, he wanted to start a network. And in order to start a network, you need other shows that aren't just yours. You need other voices. You need other topics.
Sure.
You need other people. So he reached out to the people who were around him, and I was one of them. He was like, "Hey, I want you to start a podcast." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, why don't you start a podcast?" I'm like, Why would I do that?" He's like, "Well, I'm starting a network. I need other shows." I'm like, "Well, don't you have like other famous people who would do?" It's like, no, they're busy. Like, I want the people around me I want to hear what they have to say. I think everybody should be doing this. I think anybody could start a podcast. I'm like, well, not anyone. I guess I don't want to do this.
Right.
It's like, why would I do this? Who would listen to this? And what would I even podcast about? You podcast about, making films and you're and being famous and, whatever, going to parties and traveling. I do none of that. And people know me because I work for you. That's it. That's the only thing people know about me. He's like, "No, man, just talk about what you love." Like, what do you love? I'm like, "I don't know. I love Star Wars. I love comic books. I love food." He's like, "That's a podcast."
That's a podcast.
I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Who's gonna listen to that?" He's like, "People who love Star Wars, comic books, and food." I was like, "Oh." So we set up on a poker table, beat up poker table in the back of the comic book shop. I grabbed my coworker, Mike Zapsik, who is now a partner in a shared universe, and we sat down and recorded that first episode, and it was one of the funnest things I ever did.
You were hooked, right
I
away.
was hooked, yeah. I think it was the combination of talking about all the stuff that we loved. Plus, I got to do it with a friend, so we had a pretty good flow. And I think something about these microphones, they make you open up from the shyest people. Like I've gone to high schools where it's like, oh yeah, that kid doesn't say anything, and then put a microphone in front of him, ask him what he did yesterday or what he loves doing. Bam, they start opening up. So I think the same thing happened to me, and we were hooked. So that podcast is called I Sell Comics, and then we just recorded our 312th episode. Been going for about 10 years.
Oh,
10 years, okay. Yeah, about 10 years. So we've gone, I mean, almost every week we took a few breaks here and there. It's been fairly consistent. We started just venting about nerd stuff. So we would argue about movies and comic books and things like that. So if say a movie we were highly anticipating was really good, of course we wanted to talk about it. If it came out and it sucked, then we really wanted to talk about it. So we want, what went wrong? How dare they? What were they thinking? And by the end of it, I was like, I feel much better now. I feel, there's nothing I can do to change the course of that movie. It's out already. They already screwed it up. But by talking about it, I felt a little better, I guess.
I love it. Yeah. And I'm getting my students to podcast.
That's great.
And so I have a student who already handed one in, and it's great. He interviewed his grandmother, who had a great story.
Great, yeah.
And you can hear him off camera.
I love it when people interview family members. It's something we've been preaching here. I was like, hey, bring your mom in, bring your dad in, bring your kid in, whatever. Especially at my age, my parents are getting elderly, and so I actually I have sat my mom and dad down, and I learned a lot.
Sure.
I learned a lot. It never really came up in natural conversation. A lot of the very basic questions I should have asked them before. What was your childhood like? How did you, what was going through your head when you met, my dad, your husband for the first time. What was going through your head when you found out you were pregnant with me? Things like that. It's like I never thought to ask, but I did this time, and I have it recorded. It's cool.
So you teach classes here,
yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what if somebody came to one of your classes, what would they leave the class? What kind of skills do they leave with?
They would leave with the confidence and knowledge on how to start their own podcast, how to prepare.
Right.
A lot of basically I pass on to them all the mistakes or I teach them not to make the mistakes I've made in the last 10 years. Plus everything that's helped me out, and it can be as basic as, all right, turn your cell phone off. But you'd be surprised how many people don't do that. It's very distracting. To talking to the microphone. Those are very basic. To just basic preparation. Come in with the game plan. Make a bullet point list of what you want to talk about. Also, these are all very basic things, but these are some things that people don't think about. Anything from I think the two biggest questions we get are, one, how do I grow my audience, and two, how do I make money doing this? And those are deeper questions that require a little bit more time to answer. So, which is why we have a class. But the most important thing is they leave. Part of the class is we record a podcast, and by the time they leave, they actually have an actual recording, which they can pull up on iTunes or Spotify if they want to. And and share it with the world. So, which I think is cool. Like, that's how immediate it is. You can sit down, record that first episode, and by the time you leave that door, you're on the internet already. You're distributed on major podcast platforms.
So, have you worked with young people?
I have. I think one of my favorite things to do is every so often I get to go to a school and sit down with the kids. Usually, they'll give me 2 hours, so I'll spend the first hour telling kids about why this is cool and why they should be doing it, and then for the next hour I break them up into usually groups of 4, and we just podcast. It's very informal. My basic was, hey, when you're not stuck at school, what do you like to do? And immediately they open up. So a lot of them are musicians, a lot of them are athletes, a lot of them are gamers. Some of them are in the theater and drama. What I try to get, I just want them to talk about their passions for a little bit, and then then I end up sending the audio recording to the teacher, and they pass it on to the kids. And I think, I've met a couple kids where they say, hey, you came in last year, guess what, I started my own podcast. I'm like, really? It's like, oh, that's cool, that's awesome.
That's what I'm hoping is going to happen.
Yeah. And I love teaching kids. I think kids especially need a place to vent, to express themselves, to talk. You're a teacher. Lord knows, kids love to talk.
Not anymore.
Really? Oh yeah, I guess they're just kind of doing this, and which is sad. But so that's another reason why this is important. This will get them hopefully face to face if they have guests, and talking face to face and interacting. And I think that's cool. I wish I had this when I was in high school, 'cause I did not. I was very shy, but I had opinions. I had things I wanted to talk about. Most of it was about comic books and video games, but even still, and no one would listen to me. but you put it up on a podcast, you're assured to get at least your friends and family listening. Who knows how far it could go. It's worldwide. You might grow a huge audience. You never know. But I think the other advice that I have is don't hold back. Speak freely. It's your show. You control every direction of it. You book your own guests, and there's no one. I love it. There's no one telling you what you can and can't do. The other thing I tell kids, like, listen, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have this. If you wanted to do something like this, you had to go to radio school, pay a bunch of money to do that, and then you had to get on a radio station if they would even hire you. And then even when you got on there, they wouldn't let you talk about whatever you wanted. You would have to fit their own format. So those are a lot of hoops to jump through just to do what me and you are doing right now. There was no podcasting. We lived in a world that had a lot of walls. So that was one barrier. The radio auditions, radio school. Maybe and back in the day, if you wanted to start your own TV show, forget about it. No one could do that unless I guess you went to school or something for that. Got hired by a production company. But now, take out your phone, hit record, and then upload to YouTube. Anybody can do that. And if you want to do a live broadcast, 15 years ago, forget about it. You need satellite trucks or I wouldn't even know. Now, again, you take out your phone, you go on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, hit go live. And so take advantage of it. Do it, because we didn't... we weren't able to do this not that long ago. And now, the power of everything is you hold those keys to open those doors. You should be busting right through them and create your own thing, because you can, and it's easy, and whatever your mind thinks of, you can probably do it. I think that's pretty awesome. And
that's great.
I myself definitely taking advantage of all three of those, because I remember how hard it was.
Sure.
I was like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if we could we could do a live talk show or something, or whatever, or we could shoot our own short and then show it to people, like a million people, or how, that it was unheard of not that long ago. Now we can. Great.
You've given my students so much. I think you said it earlier. One of the things that to get started would be confidence, and they have everything else. They have the equipment. They have everything is at their fingertips. So they just need the confidence.
And I think the other thing, people are like, oh, I've never done this before. People are very nervous, right? But you're just having a conversation. Like me and you, we're just having a conversation. We do this every day, and that's as simple as it's that simple. I mean, we're recording it. And and you can edit it if you need to. Nothing's permanent, and it's really not rocket science. It's pretty, and telling stories, listening to stories, getting other people's stories. It's so much fun. It's great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.